This is the Tom Anderson Show, broadcasting live from the KVNT studios, 7 to 9 a.m., Monday through Friday.
Hey, we are back, and it's a pleasure to have my friend and a really world champion in many races. He just won another race, the Kobuk 440. He is just an exceptional top-tier dog musher and really thoughtful educator. He loves kids, he loves animals, he loves people. He tours the world and meeting with classrooms. He's the real deal. Hugh Neff joins us. Brother, congratulations. What a win.
Yeah, good morning, Tom. It's still sinking in, but everything just came together, and it was a special race. We held on there at the end. I didn't realize Richie was coming on so quickly, but we pulled it off.
Yeah, I was reading that, and it said, yeah, he was right behind him, and I'm like, yeah, right, he was a god. Nobody's right behind him. I'm like, wait a minute, he was 2 minutes behind him. Jeez, is that the closest win you've ever had?
Oh, no, dude. I don't know if you remember, but back in 2012, Alan Moore, Ellie Zirkel's husband, we had 80 miles left, and he had a 45-minute lead, and I caught up to him, believe it or not, and passed him just a mile or so from the finish line. It was the closest Yukon Quest ever. I won that one by 26
I was about
seconds.
to say, when you won the Yukon Quest, I forgot about that, how close that was, right down to the wire. No, well, first, I want to get into, when you look at your Facebook page, I mean, you've got a plethora of awesome photos in a gallery. Folks, you got to follow Hugh and what he does as a humanitarian, as a champion. He's very humble, very thoughtful, very smart. But you beloved, a mentor, a best friend, Hobo Jim. And I notice you still have his photos up. Not to get somber, we want to talk about your victory and successes, but just to touch on this, what a loss. What a loss to the world.
I mean, when Hobo passed, that you could just feel that there was such sadness in the air. Yeah. But he's still with us, and we're living. He's living through us now. Is the way I say it. Brent Sass is like my little brother, and we both lived a lot of the same journey. And I was so happy to see Brent win the Iditarod this year, because Hobo was a huge part of Brent's life too. People don't realize we're not just sitting there listening to his song. We listen to his songs pretty much every day. And Brent was listening to Hobo music. We were talking about it in Cripple at the checkpoint there when we were taking our 24-hour break. Brent was listening to Hobo the whole way on the trail, and I'm usually singing his songs in my head. You know how that goes.
You bet.
Yeah, Hobo is Alaska and always will be.
He's iconic, and he will never be forgotten, that's for sure. His legacy, you just said, goes on, permeates even through the Iditarod and through the musher's psyche. I talked about Germany off air with you before this interview began, and I mentioned my relatives there, and you said you as well have German heritage, and you said, Tom, we've gone there regularly, planning another trip, and you mentioned Hobo Jim went with you last time. What's the reception in Europe when you go there?
Oh, when Hobo was there, he's just like a god, and the Germans and many Europeans. I'm going to be up in Sweden too, and the traveling visiting folks. I go to the Netherlands and all sorts of England, wherever folks love dog mushing, and they really love Alaska. You say the word Alaska anywhere in the world, and people just get a smile on their face. And you know how it is when you're traveling. Like, it's nice to go visit places, but when you get off that plane at Ted Stevens Airport, and you get on the road and you start looking at the mountains, and you just realize that there's just nothing that even compares to the Great Land's beauty. And that's why we love to share our love of Alaska with everyone around the world, because we're very fortunate to do what we do, and to be a musher and to live the life that I've lived. There's a lot of work and a little bit of cold and suffering involved at times out on the trail, but we're living in heaven up here, and we have to honor Alaska by giving back somehow.
We really do. We really are blessed. I look at where you went. I mean, folks, Northwest Arctic Borough, Norvik, Selawik Ambler, Shungnak. I mean, there's so many places. Of course, Kobuk, the eponymous name of the race, Kayana, where we have friends there. Lori, the late Lori Shirk. I know that his Greta's I think his name is Kevin Hansen, her husband,
Yeah,
my good friend
I know
Greta.
Greta, Kevin. We had a little after party at their place the other night. I can't believe you just brought them up.
Yeah, no, sure. They're very
great
good family
people.
friends. And Hansen,
Paul
of course,
Hansen, of
married
course,
in.
ran the hospital up there for years.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's a small world, but looking at those places, and let's get into how long you've been mushing and what inspired you. If people don't know the Hugh Neff story, tell us about it. What inspired you to come to Alaska and get into dog mushing, or were you already mushing before you got to the last frontier?
I just think it was predestined. You know, I was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee, grew up outside of Chicago, a place called Evanston. My dad was a tough German dude. He was from Indiana. He was a Hoosier, even though he went to Purdue. So I guess he was a Boilermaker. But he had me working since I was 11 years old. A lot of the stuff, you know, our folks did to us back then probably wouldn't be allowed in today's world. But I had a paper out every day after school. And then, you know, by 12 or 13, I started being a golf caddy. My paper out, by the way, was in Evanston, if you remember any of those John Hughes movies, like 16 Candles.
Sure.
Or the Breakfast Club. I used to deliver papers to the house where they filmed the movie Uncle Buck, believe it or not.
Oh, wow, with John Candy.
Yeah, it gets worse, dude. And then I got into caddying, and I don't know if you remember, but I used to caddy for Bill Murray all the time. He went to my high school, Loyola Academy.
Jeez, I did not know that.
And then I grew up, the public school, same age as me, was, you know, John Cusack and Jeremy Piven and those guys. But yeah, it's been a great life. I you know, I'm just going to keep rolling with it. I never take anything that I've done for granted. I've had a lot of ups and downs. But I saw Hobo Jim on Good Morning America with David Hartman back in the 80s, sitting on my dad's couch, wondering what I wanted to do with my life. And I knew I just needed to be outdoors, and I wanted to, you know, do something different, not just be another guy in Chicago heading down to the stock exchange every day with a suit and tie. So I saw Hobo singing, you know, a song called Where Legends Are Born. He's outside the Portage Glacier, and I just started crying, and I'm like, man, I want to be wherever this guy is. So I got a job working for Great Land Marketing. They were over by Diamond, and they worked for them, and decided to go to the Alaska State Fair. And of course, I ended up at this loose box, and there's this wild man up on a picnic table stomping his feet and singing, and I was like, holy cow, I want to have that guy's energy. And that's why we all loved Hobo, because he had that amazing energy. So from there, I just sent some letters out saying, hey, I'm looking for work, and thankfully my hero, Rick Swenson, didn't have a job for me, but he told me what to do. He replied to me back in Chicago and said, well, you need to go to the bulletin board at Cold Spot Feeds in Fairbanks, and there's usually job offerings. So I got work, worked for a guy named Bill Mitchell. Through there, I met the Earhart family, so I ended up moving from Fairbanks to Tanana up on the Yukon River, and worked for a legendary chief, you know, Lester Earhart. Lester was best friends with George Atla. So I ended up, you know, wanting to do Iditarod by working with a bunch of sprint mushers, and I ended up, you know, in the sprint mushing scene, and that family basically adopted me, and I became an Earhart, and they never paid me a dime. They fed me, and I would get maybe a dog a month, and that's how I started getting my team together.
And that's how you evolve. By the way, is Rick Swenson, I got to jump in. 5 times he's won the Iditarod. I know Seavey the same, but he's called the king of the Iditarod. Would you say he is the greatest musher, or would you say you simply can't label one person that because there's so much talent out there?
Oh, I mean, the greatest musher is George Atla, dude. I mean, it's not even close.
I love George Atla.
And I respect Dallas. I think he's a good kid, and he's well-meaning and everything, but I don't consider him to be a 5-time champion. That race last year was not the Iditarod. It's the Iditarod Loop. And that's him. He's a perfectionist. He's really dialed in. He does well. But, I mean, there's just Rick Swenson as far as long distance goes. And I don't really think numbers define how great you are as a musher, because Rick Swenson's great, but let's be real. I mean, Lance Mackey, what he did was just unreal. And I was there. I had front row seats for that. And I got to hang out with him for, you know, a few hundred miles every year before he disappeared on me and ended up in Nome at the Board of Trade a day or two before me. But Lance obviously has to be up there in any discussion of greatest mushers ever. And any Mackey, really, his dad, his brother. I don't really get into the who's the greatest this or that, because it's a generational thing, different technology. What I love about Rick Swenson, though, is he pulled it off when they didn't have all the fancy gear and everything. Like, what he did was really, really special.
It was special. It was before we had all the technology. We're talking with Hugh Neff. He is a champion from Yukon Quest to this week, the Kobuk 440. He's an amazing talent. We're going to talk more about his life, what he's done, what he plans to do, his racers. He got into some of the colleagues that he races against and his friendships. Stay with us. Good morning, Tom Anderson Show.
This is the Tom Anderson Show, broadcasting live from the KVNT studios, 7 to 9 a.m., Monday through Friday.
Sled Dog musher and Alaskan Hugh Neff, and before he heads off to more classrooms and touring the world because of our beloved dog mushing sport here in Alaska, I have a couple questions, and I want to get into Jim's dogs as well, Hugh, but the races. My dad was listening, and retired Trooper Colonel Tom Anderson said, hey, ask about Kobuk versus Yukon Quest. You've won so many races versus Iditarod. Technicality, difficulty, which ones do you like the most?
I love them all. Kobuk, 440, a little bit smaller race. Usually the field's only, 15 to 20 teams. It's pretty awesome, though, because my first one was back in 2003, and I remember I came in fifth, I think, which was pretty good for a rookie. But I also got to hang out with Jeff King, and basically Jeff does it every year, and, he's one of the greats of the sport, and so it's always fun to hang out with him and all the old school native mushers in that area. What makes it so beautiful there is the people. It's just so everybody's so friendly. The Inupiaq Eskimos in every village are so. I got so many hats given to me, fur hats and gifts, and everybody was really cheering me on. It was pretty amazing. This is my 15th 440, and this is the first time I won it. So people were really pumped up about that. What was really amazing this year, though, thousands of caribou everywhere. We're going through Ambler, on to Shugnak to Kobuk, and then we do like a loop, and there's just caribou on both sides of the team, and they're running around in circles. The dogs are getting all juiced up, squealing away and barking. So it was like being in a big safari park. It was just unreal.
And you won by 2 minutes. You had someone on your tail, didn't you? Did you know that at the end?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I had an hour on him leaving the last checkpoint, so I knew I just had to cruise in. And I stopped 15 minutes before I came in. I stopped on a hill that looks out over Kotzebue, and I could look backwards about a mile. So I stopped and made sure the dogs had booties that were all de-iced and looking good, and I snacked the team with some salmon, and just did what I call my Lance Mackey thank you. Lance would do this every year before he won a race. He would stop the team before he had to go and deal with the media and all that, and he would thank the dogs. I knew I was going to win it. I just didn't realize that he's coming on that strong.
So
I think
close.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's great for the sport to have these close races.
No, of course. And by the way, Capstone Clinic is one of our sponsors of the show, and they were a big-time sponsor. 10, 20, 30, 40,000. I can't remember how much they sponsored for another race for the Iditarod. And, man, were they getting beat up by Peta on Facebook. And our ad agency controls their Facebook page, so we had to be deleting and blocking. That must get frustrating. Do you get ever heckled
I equate
bothered?
PETA. I equate PETA with what the Russians do with their hacking. They're just PETA kills more dogs than any other organization in America, I believe, and that's been going on for years. So I am not a big PETA fan. I don't pay attention to them. I think it's embarrassing that they're allowed to have any type of stuff on buses or whatever's going on. You hear it through the grapevine, but I don't pay attention to any negative energy. Because I know what I'm doing is in a positive light, and I'm always trying to be positive about life despite the obstacles.
Yep. And you love your dogs. Hugh Neff, you love your dogs more than anything.
I don't just love I don't just love my dogs. I love Jim Lanier's Northern Whites.
I was about to say that's right. But let's get to the Iditarod. Then we'll segue into Jim Lanier and what he did for you with his dogs, which you just won, and you've won other races, but this is a big deal. It's your first Kobuk win. So the Iditarod, just give me a glance on that in retrospect and how it feels to win after getting out of the Iditarod.
Well, I was, people think I scratched. I was basically forced to scratch. It was not my decision. I was in second place. I mean, the whole thing's always going to be, I'll always be shocked by it. And it's always going to sadden me. And I don't, really know when I'm going to do the Iditarod again. But right now, the people that are in control of that race, I don't think they really are defining the spirit of what Joe Reddington created that race for. And it was to honor Alaska and celebrate the Alaska lifestyle. It wasn't supposed to be all corporate influenced, trying to package a certain type of person and certain type of musher. I'm not going to change who I am. I'm always going to be the cat in the hat. I'm always going to be that goofy kid from Chicago that just wants to celebrate being an Alaskan. And I really think that they just didn't want me to be a part of the race, and that's pretty sad considering how much work I went through. I think by how well we did in this race, just, even when I was forced to scratch, I had to run the dog team 2 miles to my buddy, Billy Honey's sister's house. And I'd never even heard from Iditarod since then. And that still sort of irks me that supposedly they didn't want me in the race because my dogs weren't good enough or they were not healthy enough. Yet they basically just told me to leave and never even bothered to contact me to see how I was doing.
Rob, the new CEO, I think he was a national triathlon CEO, and he came in. Did you like working with Stan prior to Rob?
Oh, I like Stan just because he's a Notre Damer, and I'm a Chicago boy. I like the Irish, and and Stan was always nice to me. I try not to have any issues with anybody, but obviously people have issues with me and my flamboyant nature, but I ain't going to change who I am.
You're not going to change who you are. Let's talk about your dogs and Jim.
I don't even know who this Rob guy is. Never even met him. Seen his picture. I have no idea who he is.
But you haven't met him in person. Yeah, and I've talked to him on the phone when we dealt with sponsorship elements of the race. When we look at your dogs, I mean, they're the star of the show, aren't they? It's not just you. It's kind of like a horse racer. It's the horse as much as the jockey.
Yeah, Jim and Anna, Northern Whites Kennel, Anna Bonardenko, another Iditarod vet. They're also professional opera singers. And believe it or not, back in the day in Fargo, Jim was a chauffeur and drove a guy around named John F. Kennedy. So Jim's been around the block. He's the only musher to ever do the Iditarod in every decade. I could go on and on about their dogs. They're so beautiful. And guess what? Out of the 12 dogs, only 2 boys. All girls. All dominant, very. They've traveled all over. Not only have I raced with them, Nick Petit, great musher, raced with them. Matt Pizziglio, several other prominent, well-known Iditarod mushers, and Jim is planning on racing again. Jim will never stop being a musher. It's what he does every day. He's a retired pathologist as well. He's a doctor. He was the doctor for Joe Reddington back in the day.
Do you think it's more important?
He's a genius when it comes to dogs.
Hugh, $1 million question. Is it the dogs? Is it the technology and equipment? Is it the musher? How do you become a winner like Hugh Neff with Yukon Quest and Kobuk and other races? Or is it a combination of all of that?
Well, we have a golden word in dog mushing, and I guess you could say in Alaska. It's called perseverance. And you just gotta believe. It took me 15 years to win this thing, and I don't really even care if I won it or not. To be honest, I mean, I just love to travel and have fun and be with the dogs out on the trail. There's an energy that it's hard to equate when you're flying down the trail, and it's the northern lights are out, or you're going through a huge windstorm like we had this last race. The final run on this last race, by the way, the reason the kid was catching up to me, Richie, and Richie's not a kid. He's probably in his mid-30s by now, but I had to break trail. I was breaking through 4 to 6 inches, and your dad's, he knows what it's like out there. And when you're breaking through 4 to 6 inches of trail, that team that's behind you is going to be catching you. So I knew he was catching me. I just didn't know when and where. And thankfully, I kept it together, and we were zigzagging, down the Kobuk River and then across Kobuk Lake, and then you hit a portage before you drop down into Kotzebue. And the amazing thing was my main leader was named Solo. Get this, Tom. Solo, 62-pound female. She's only 20 months old. I won the 440 with a yearling in lead, dude, and she's magical. One of the most amazing girls you've ever seen. And Solo is Anna's little baby. She sleeps in the house at night. Whenever Anna gets home, if I'm around there in Chugak, she'll always be like, "Somebody go get my Solo." And Anna's Ukrainian, so she's got quite a thick accent.
Well, and she's dealing with probably family members with Russia and Ukraine. We're almost out of time. We're talking with Hugh Neff. He is such an inspiration to so many, and especially he loves the students, and he goes to so many classrooms. Hugh, to follow you, website and Facebook, I presume?
Oh, yeah, and for all you teachers in Alaska, the shows are for free in Alaska, and I just love trying to teach kids. I use dogs as a metaphor, just like Jack London, how to get along with each other, how to respect one another, and how to achieve their dreams.
There you go, Hugh Neff, champion of the Kobuk 440 2022, champion of Yukon Quest and other races. He's a champion to a lot of our listeners, and we always appreciate when you take the time. Safe travels. I know you're going to drive south today, and we'll get you back for sure, maybe over the summer. Okay, Hugh?
All right, Tom. God bless Alaska.
Thank you, brother. God bless Alaska. He was picking on me because I said, God bless Texas. And he said, what about the last frontier? Hugh Neff, an awesome gentleman and racer. Tom Anderson Show. God bless.